So, hi, I'm Melissa Perley, and today we're going to do something kind of unusual. We are going to turn the camera on the camera person. So, Kelly Otty, we're at Kelly's farm, and we came today to talk with her about the fact that she is going to be, at some point, moving from this farm into a larger farm. So, we wanted to talk about what it's like when you have the opportunity to build your dream. So Kelly, hey.
Hey.
How does it feel to be on the other side of the camera?
It's a little bizarre, but you know.
So I wanted to ask you, you're currently living in North Ferrisburgh, which you were telling us is essentially began as a horse farm. And then what did you start? Like, how did you start? Did you build this barn as a barn for horses?
We did. So we moved here in 2010, and at that point I think I was down to 2 horses at that point. And we had the barn built, and it's 24 by 36 horse barn, and we have tractor storage and in the barn as well. So it wasn't just all for the horses.
Yeah.
And then we had a small area fenced for the horses, so that big enough so we could rotate them. But yeah, it was primarily built for our horses.
So how many horses did you have when you at the most?
At the most, I actually just had 3 of my own.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But then you were saying that your oldest horse lived 31?
Yeah, she was 31 when she passed away.
Wow.
I had her since I was a teenager.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So you moved your horses here
Yes.
from your family home?
Yes.
Took them away from your parents?
Yep. They, my girl that was 31 went to college with me, so.
Really?
Yeah.
So you rode in college and things? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like competitively? Or?
Yeah, I was on the team in college. Yep.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting because you said that when she finally went, that understandably that space seemed really quiet, and the term that you used was sad and lonely.
Yeah.
So I was saying that then perhaps that's how you were feeling as well at the time.
Oh, for sure.
And so what made you transition? Because why not get another horse? What made you transition to sheep?
Yeah, so at the time that she passed, I was co-owner of a yarn store, and I've always been a knitter pretty much. My grandmother had taught me when I was quite young, probably 7 or 8. She taught me to knit and crochet, and so as the co-owner of a yarn store, one of the things that was really important to all of us owners was that we carried local yarns from local farmers.
Yeah.
So I had the privilege of getting to know some of the farmers really well and establish relationships with them. And so it really kind of, the idea of having sheep kind of scratched a lot of itches, the animal husbandry part of it, a lot of what I studied in college. So my degree is animal science with a concentration in equine reproduction. So a lot of that transfers over. The biggest difference between the horses and the sheep is that, sheep are true ruminants, horses are not. So, and, obviously the size difference and things like that, and that they have wool, but, the reproduction part of it, so much of that transfers over.
It does?
Yeah.
Because my understanding is that sheep are they obviously reproduce in birth, but it would seem like they'd be more challenging than horses, for example. But no?
I don't think so. That hasn't been my experience. Knock on wood, but but no, that hasn't been my experience with it, at least to this point. So. But a lot of the information, I did a lot of genetics studying in school, and for a long time I didn't really use my degree a whole lot, just being a store owner and more in the retail and fiber arts part of things, and now to be able to do all of it, I can use my degree. I can also use my love of fiber arts. I was a few credits away from having a minor in arts, in art. So it really allows me to use all of those things that I love. So.
Right. And but why not goats, and why not pigs, which I mention pretty much in every podcast, so everybody knows that I really want a pig. So why not? But why not? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think just the idea of having sheep would give me a usable product that I really enjoy working with, the wool part of it. And I'd visited some of my friends' farms and just really enjoyed the time that I had with the sheep. So that's so cool. So what gave you the push then to leave the spot that it sounds like you essentially were able to begin again with new animals? What made you think this isn't enough, or we want to do something different? What, you and your husband, how did you make that decision? So we were very limited on our acreage here on our farm, and we realized, so let's see, it was almost 3 years ago, not quite, 2.5, 3 years, maybe more, I don't know. I think we're 3 years now.
It's a blur.
I know.
Building.
I know.
It's a blur.
3 years ago, I sold my shares of the yarn store and went to farming full time. So the farming part of it is my full time gig. I still teach a lot of classes in fiber arts, and I really enjoy selling my yarn and interacting with customers, and doing that part of it too. But I also knew that I really enjoyed the animal husbandry part of it, and I wanted to continue growing my flock. So we're really limited on the amount of sheep we can have here. Had we not had property, I wouldn't have bred any of my ewes this year. But we've got property. We're going to be able to move them, the sheep, even before we build. My parents' house will be done sooner than ours. So we'll have water and electricity and things like that down there, at least that established.
And your parents to help you.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's mention that.
So they can kind of keep an eye on things, and then I can go down every couple of days and just, really keep my eyes on the sheep that we have down there. So
they're lambing this season?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I'll be selective of the sheep that I take down there. I'll keep the ewes and the lambs here. Because there's all kinds of things that can happen with young animals. So so just that I can keep my eyes on them. But the land we're moving to has a lot more acreage, a lot more usable acreage for grazing, so that I can continue to expand the flock.
So you started with 9 sheep.
I started with 9.
And that was how long ago?
That was in 2020. So,
in 2020.
Yeah.
And now you have how many, not including the pregnant ones, like how many on the ground?
So right now on the farm, I've got 41.
41.
Yeah.
That happens so quick,
it
right?
Does.
It happens so quickly.
It does. Yeah.
And so are you feeling like you have now own land in Bridport, and Bridport you said is from you, how far?
It's just about half an hour south of us.
Yeah.
So it's not far. It's, it won't be a really trying move.
Right.
I've moved a lot, so yeah. And I've moved before without a farm with horses,
without sheep.
but with no sheep. So that'll take a little bit of planning, but
it'll happen.
It can happen.
Yeah.
So
tell me this. So what does that have to offer that this does not? And I'm curious about how you feel about leaving this, because it's essentially where you began everything. And I understand the size, and that's an appeal. Yeah. But you had your horses here, and so how difficult is that? And what does the new place offer you that this place doesn't?
Yeah. So I think for me, it's always a little bit bittersweet. You always build memories of wherever you go. Yeah. So I think it will definitely be bittersweet, but the new property, we built the barn on this property, but the house was here. And it's not exactly what we would build for our house, but it was what was available at the time.
Yeah.
So we're building our house. We're working with an architect and designing it, hoping it's going to be our forever house. And I'm going to have a barn that's going to be exactly what I want it to be.
You have the map in front of you.
I do. Yeah. And I can put insets in when I'm editing, so that people can get an idea of what that's going to be. And that's a nice thing, because I've had almost 4 years with the sheep now. I know how I work with the sheep and things that are really important for me to have going forward. You know, having my parents on the farm too, you know, I love spending time with family, so you know that's gonna be huge. Just having them be around, even if they're not super involved with day-to-day operations of the farm. You know, I love just, you know, going next door and having a cup of tea with my mom, or you know, so that'll be really nice, and just the opportunity to have it really be exactly what we want.
What you want. And I think one of the things, one of the impetuses for you and I is education in this, right? So what we've done with the podcast series is try to choose topics that would be interesting and educational for people who are trying, who are saying, what would it mean for me to get into this? Like, what would it require? So the way I'm seeing it is you're kind of like living the dream here, because you get to reimagine your ideal space, right? And doesn't everybody stand in their barn and say, man, I wish I had more hay storage, or I wish I had, you know, things closer together or something. So tell us like what that looks like, the new space for you. And in a sense, what we're saying is, although people wouldn't have to have the exact same thing, everyone has their own idea of ideal. But what if you were going to build, like, right, if you could just build your space, what's important? And something that I found really interesting that you and I talked about was the idea of aging and being able to continue the work. So what have you've taken that into account, which I think is great. So tell me what you have there that is Kelly's ideal, but it may be also somebody else's ideal. On how a sheep farm will work. Sure.
So, you know, I've got Shetlands, so Shetlands really don't need anything. They're super hardy. They could live outside all the time. But there's a number of things that I do with my barn, with my spaces, that I'm not a spring chicken anymore, and I would love to keep doing this for another 30 or 40 years. And so to enable me to do that...
Kelly is a spring chicken, everyone. Just so you know.
So one of the things that we're doing is... the barn and the equipment shed are standalone. They're two separate buildings. So we do have a tractor, and we have space built into the equipment shed for our tractor, for our implements, things like that. But we also have a large storage space for hay. We have started feeding the large square bales. They're the ones we get are 3 foot by 3 foot by 8 feet. So you have to have a tractor or some way of moving them. So our farmer that we buy our hay from comes with a big dump body truck, dumps the hay, and then we move it with a tractor. So, you know, it takes a little time to get all that put away, but we're also not manually moving hay up into a hay loft, which is what we do here. You know, and hay day usually is in, you know, well, in the hottest day of the year, almost always, when you get your hay, they call you up in August, and you're putting hay up in your barn, and it's like 90 degrees up in the hay loft. So it's not having to do that part of it and lift bales. You know, the large squares, you do need a tractor, but once you've got them stored, you know, you cut them open just like you would a small square bale, and the flakes of hay are much bigger, but they're manageable to move around. And
so, they don't, the way you have it set up, you have a separate space for that, so they're not infringing on your animal space.
Exactly. Yeah. So we have that separate. The buildings are right next to each other, so we go right from one to the other. So that's one of the things. The other thing, my barn is primarily going to be a space. There's an office space in it for me, so I can keep all of my records and my medicines and everything like that. And it's going to be a heated space, which right now I have to keep like all of my medicines and everything in the house, and then if something happens, I have to run back to the house, grab stuff, all my things in the winter, because you can't let all that stuff freeze. So I'll have a dedicated space for that. I'll have wool processing space. I do some of my own wool processing. I also utilize mills too, but I'm going to have some wool processing space in that heated area, so I'll be able to use it all year round for skirting fleeces and carding wool and dyeing my wool and things like that. I'll have dedicated
Is that something
space.
you're not doing here?
I do that here, but I have to use my kitchen for dyeing, or if it's really cold, then I'll move everything out of the way in this space that we're in and bring fleeces and skirt in here.
We use a sawhorse and a piece of plywood.
Yeah, well,
very high tech.
My husband, actually, I designed a skirting table, and he built it for me. So
nice,
super handy guy.
Nice.
And I'm also going to have a quarantine space.
Nice.
Because we typically keep a fairly close flock, but on occasion you got to bring a new ram in or whatever it is. That space is also going to be set up again with my handy husband. He's going to weld some panels for, we keep multiple rams on our farm, and after breeding season, reintroducing those rams to one another can be a little bit spicy. And they like to destroy buildings and gates
and each other
and things. So what we typically do is put them in a small pen together, at least the two higher in the, like our alpha ram and his underling. We tend to put them in a small pen together to get each other scent back on themselves, and then after a day or two they're fine. So he is actually going to weld together some nearly ram indestructible panels for that same quarantine space, so I can keep an eye on them. They can be in there, they can push each other around, but without getting hurt. So you keep them in a small space so that they can't charge each other, and that's when they can really do a lot of damage. And the Shetlands, they have horns too, so so that'll be really nice to have right in that main space in the barn. The barn is primarily going to be, for lambing too. So
we have it like a crib in there, and
so we'll have right now. So we've got some panels, modular panels that we can set up for lambing pens, and I use them for like a creep feeder and all. So and the space is going to be really flexible, so I can use that modular panels to really divide the space if I need to. And I'm also going to have a handling system set up inside full time. So, a lot of the handling systems are designed so that they can be used outside, but we get such fluctuations in our temperature and our climate and everything that I really want it to last. So I'm going to set it up so that it's going to be inside. And also, again, my handy welder husband is going to build a lot of the flat panels for that. We'll probably buy the head gates and all those things already established, built from companies that do that. But we can save a lot of money by having him do some of the, the simpler panels and gates and things like that. So the total of how many buildings in your new property? So the new property probably is looking like 5 buildings. So house, garage, barn, equipment storage shed, which also has our hay storage in it, and then my husband's workshop. So he does woodworking and welding. So that's he's going to have that space too.
It's so interesting to me because although this is, a lot of it is really modernized, right, in a way, and it makes your life really easy. But not that long ago, we were at the Calvin Coolidge homestead, and it's interesting to me because when you talk about it, I think about the fact that this is the way things have always been. There was always like a shop that had tools and things so you could fix your tractors and all those things. So in a way, we're not that far from the way things were done. Really. Because when I hear that, it reminds me of how that was as well. And I guess you talk about your husband, your handy husband, in case he watches. But also, so is your family involved on the farm? Are you going to have? You'll have more. What is your ideal number of sheep? Or do you not have one?
So, I mean, I'd like to ideally keep it under 100 sheep that we're caring for full time. Yeah. I want to be able to have it be not so big that I absolutely have to rely on having help on the farm.
That's what I wondered. Who's going to help you?
Yeah.
Will it be family?
I mean, so primarily, especially with a handling system, I'm going to be able to do a lot of it on my own. And I do on a day-to-day basis. It's me. I do all of the care. At shearing time, vaccinating time, I do have some help. My husband is always game to help with stuff like that. And on shearing days, sometimes I get some extra help from people that are really interested in doing what I do. So I do a lot of farm experiences. They're kind of like a farm tour, but even more with more things. And I do a lot of those throughout the year, so it's kind of an educational thing.
Do you do your own shearing?
I don't do my own shearing. No, I have a shearer. I know how to shear. I went to shearing school. I'm very slow at it, so I am very happy to pay my very deserving shearer very well for her time. Right. So we actually we've got some sheep that are ruing outside, so Shetland's rue, and and I know some Shetland farms, they only keep sheep that will rue so that they can do that themselves, but that's a lot of time.
So tell us what ruing is.
So ruing, a lot of the primitive sheep, Shetlands are primitive sheep. They're Northern European short-tailed breed, which there's a number of them, the Icelandics, the Soys, just to name a few. They will naturally, not all of them, but a lot of them have retained the ability to shed their fleeces. So a lot of times we'll start with the rams, and it's my rams that are starting to rue. They get a weak spot in their fleece where it'll just stop growing, and then the new fleece will start growing underneath that. So they start looking a little raggedy, and you can tell. And so I actually went out and I peeled away the neck wall of one of my rams. So he's just got this band of just little fuzz coming in underneath, but I could tell that it was coming in, and they actually, some of them really love it when you, especially around their face, because you just are kind of pulling that wool back, and it doesn't hurt them at all, and it's kind of itchy and it feels so good. And sometimes when you get further back on their body, though, it's kind of ticklish to them, so they don't like it as much. So they kind of
rue the day.
Yes, exactly.
I can't help it.
I know, right?
I had to do it. Yeah. Okay. All right. So will you already said your husband's going to be involved.
Yeah.
Your parents, is part of living on your property to be part of the farm? Is that something they're looking forward to, or will the shades go down when it's like, no, we're not home?
No, they definitely they do enjoy the sheep a lot, and they have come to all of our shearing days that we've had, and they'll help. It's always nice having extra hands to sweep the shearing floor and bag up wool, and I typically don't skirt my fleeces at shearing day. I just I don't have enough time to do that, and try to manage everything else too. So we typically will just kind of bag all the wool for that day, and then the week after, or days even after, I'll go through and at least do a preliminary skirting. But so they really do enjoy coming and helping with that part of it, and everybody loves lambing, right?
Exactly.
So
and you're about to, have you launched? You're not lamb yet, because did you plan that so that you could make the move before everybody starts, or
no? So it's going to be a while before we actually move.
Okay.
So it'll be at least that, probably fall, winter, and maybe even next year before we're fully moved.
So when will you start lambing?
So our lambing, we're due to start lambing anytime April 10th and on.
Okay. So you're going to have a busy spring.
Yeah, busy spring.
I mean, to go in that time from 9 to 41 to whatever you're going to bring it to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we had a lot of people who wanted to start their own flocks last year. I think we ended up selling about a quarter of our flock off. So we do raise our Shetlands for breeding stock as well as wool. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And so do you have, will this bigger space change, not only the volume, clearly it's going to change the volume.
Sure.
But will it change what you want to do with your operation? Do you see do you see an on-site farm store, or you know what I mean? Do you see things changing for yourself?
So I mean, we always kind of had in the back of our mind that we'd like to do a farm stay at some point. It won't be something that we do right away, but you know, it's something that we'd eventually like to think about adding in, and at least doing a farm stand, if not farm store, on the property would be nice to do. I'm going to continue to do the farm tours, farm experiences that I do. I'm actually going to even ramp that up more. Yeah.
And is that those are not stays? They're just an experience.
Exactly.
So come for
so people come for about an hour, and I do a presentation on wool processing, so how I do it by hand, and explain the differences by how I do it by hand and how the mill would also do it, you know, because it's very similar. It's just on a much grander scale that the mill does. I teach people how to card wool and spin wool, so they all get to, you know, have their hand doing that. We hang out with the sheep, you know, because a lot of the people are coming from, you know, New York, Boston, you know, cities that they don't have these experiences where they get to go and hang out with farm animals. So we've had people from all over the U.S. and also from around the world. We had people from Greece. We've had people from South America. So it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy, you know, now that I'm on the farm full time, I don't get off the farm very much. So actually having people come to me is kind of nice, because then I still get that interaction.
So what would be, you know, if you had to choose one thing that you're looking forward to being different, what would it be? I think having the barn set up the way I want it and having the flow to it. I'm really looking forward to that. You know, we're spending a lot of time on getting the details of the house right, but the barn, I had that drawn up, and like you know, ready. I had that one drawn up and handed it to our builder and been like, "This is what I want," and that was like the first thing I handed him, right? So, and the barn's going to be bigger than the house, of course, because that's what it needs to be. Now the question: do you think at any time will a horse find its way into that barn? I bet there's a stable sitting there.
Yeah, so you know, it's a possibility. I would love to. So I've always had riding horses, but I also love driving. I did some driving, and I thought it would be fun to have like a little pony driving team or something. You know, just to go driving out onto the farm, and so I at some point may do that too. So
it's wonderful to have this dream and have all these things that you don't know how they'll turn out. And it's interesting because I'm sitting here with Kelly, and she'll add this in afterward, but with her map and all of her grounds and her buildings and everything. But I know that even though we're talking about, you know, this is a grander scale than a lot of people would do it, but it's still something that requires a lot of conversation, because I know my husband built our barn and our two chicken coops, and what was some of the small details that I would have liked to have not taken as much time. But, you know, facing the barn south. So they never got the cold blowing wind on them. Small details about the way the light falls on the animals and what their yard will look like and things like that are really important to think out before you start doing that. And I know a lot of people use buildings they already have in existence for their chicken coops, and then they're wondering why they're having major massacres.
Yeah.
So I guess in thinking about implementing, whether it's big, small, medium, whatever, what are some of the ups and downs of doing this? Yeah. And what would you say are some of the pitfalls so that people would know, you know, stay away from this, don't do this?
Yeah, so I think for us, some of the things that we've been having to navigate are permits.
Permits.
Whether it's town permits, whether it's state permits, the tax department, because in Vermont, you know, we've got the current use where if you're using your land for forestry or agriculture, you can get tax breaks on the portion that's being used for agriculture, and what buildings qualify, because you're building certain buildings can qualify as agriculture, but you know, if they have certain features in them, if they have living quarters, they don't qualify unless it's farm workers. There's been a lot of that, and just kind of navigating through that. You know, the town has been great to work with. You know, I think a lot of it is some of the state departments. You know, some of the there's a little variability in how they interpret some of what the laws and regulations are, and so that you ask one department one thing and they'll say one thing, and then you ask somebody else something else and they'll tell you something different. So that's been
red tape.
Yeah, that's been a little bit tricky, and for me that's what always, you know, you know, just catches my breath, because I'm like, oh God, and I get so uptight about that.
They're gonna shut us down before we start.
Right. And so, you know, so just trying to be thorough and do our due diligence on that end of things. And, you know, things have gotten expensive. We built a house, the house we had before this, we built, and, you know, some of the prices that we haven't gotten an estimate from our builder, but we're a little bit terrified, you know, because pricing has changed so much.
After COVID.
And, you know, so there's a lot of things that we may have to do differently. What we have on this map, we may have to rein in a little bit, you know, just based on what our budget is and what we can afford to do. So, you know, and we're fine with that, and we're looking at this realistically, you know, because we may not be able to do all of the buildings that we want to do right away, you know, but we can make it work.
Your husband's workshop, I see that. He's getting
right. I know. So so
it's the planning.
So the planning,
implementing your dream.
That part of it, you know, and you know, I think going into it realistically with a realistic thought in mind of, like, you know, we may have to make some changes to exactly how we're going to go about doing this, but our builder's great. So our builder, his dad is a dairy farmer, so nice. You know, he's got this farming background, so he looks at things and was like, oh, so, you know, for your barn, for airflow, you might want to do this, or, you know, so he's already got some of his brain is going to those places, and so that's really nice to be able to have another set of eyes looking at this from a farmer's perspective.
Right.
So
that's a good thing for people to sit down with someone and say, here are my thoughts.
Yeah.
Here's my property.
Yeah.
Does this work?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, we're doing a lot of that planning with him, with our architect, you know, with his subcontractors, you know, because they're all based in this area, so they know the area really well and can make good recommendations for solution. You know, where we are here is all sand, so our property drains really well, but half an hour south where we're going to be is all clay. So we really are having to do a lot of thinking about drainage, and so we don't end up with a swampy area. So
So a lot to think about.
Yeah, lots of moving pieces and
lots of moving. Period.
Lots of moving. Yeah. So there's a lot of things to think about.
But it looks like I always am impressed, and when I see this, what I think is yikes, because you have to move it all.
I know.
I see that piece of it, but I also see an implementation of a dream.
Yeah.
And that's how we begin everything.
Yeah.
It always has to start somewhere, and we just have to have the courage to step into it.
Yeah.
And that's what I see here. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to say to people is it seems daunting.
Yeah.
But it's possible.
Yeah.
To go from 9 to 41 and move them.
Yeah.
Right? It's possible. So I have to end the podcast like I end every podcast. Why wool, Kelly? Why not riding? Why wool? Or pigs.
Or pigs. Melissa and her pigs. For me, the why wool, I think, really started because of the wool, and I really enjoyed knitting and spinning and working with the wool. But then when I got the sheep, I love these little guys. Yeah. If you have a hard day, you can go out and sit with them, and you don't even think about that hard day anymore. They just have the sweetest personalities. They're just, they're so trusting. These are animals that are preyed upon by so many other animals, and they have to put their trust in you, and they do. I go out and just sit quietly with them, and all of a sudden they'll just all be around you, and they want to see what you're doing and see what you have in your pockets, and they're so fun, and I just really enjoy being around them and spending my time with them. So
that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing. Thank you so much for switching positions. I don't think we're going to put you behind the camera. You did such a good job. We'll have to make all our podcasts about you. Thank you so much. I think it'd be a great idea. I'd love to, we could do this again when the buildings are up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
We can do a follow-up to it and
see where you are.
See where we are and what changes we might have had to have made for whatever reason, and go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm Melissa Purley, and that is Kelly Otty with her new house and new barn plans, and we are with the Vermont Sheep and Goat Association podcast, Why Wool. Thank you so much for watching.